Hello everyone, Annette Ornelas here, Southwind Designs, and we are here for episode 4 of Quilt Snacks. If you're new to Quilt Snacks, this is a show that I started and it's weekly, every Wednesday, and it provides you with little snacks on how to do some of your quilting things. So, hello Debbie. So we're going over binding today, and I think it's going to be fun. I've done some prep work for you so you can see what you can do and how you can put your binding on. So in episode 2, I believe we actually made a binding. I showed you how to make the binding, how to sew it together, and how to fold it. And if you know me, you know that I prefer bias binding, which is, there's just so much more you can do with bias binding, and it's a lot more durable and it holds up on your quilt. It makes your quilt basically live longer. So, hi Cheryl, hi Terry, Catherine. I can see a few of you, but it's kind of scrolling through. If you've noticed, I've changed the format. Since I'm posting these videos to YouTube afterwards, I was noticing that the bottom was cutting off all the time. So I have changed the format to the landscape, and I hope you can see lots that way as well. And let me get started here just in just 1 minute. Hi Tammy. And show you how I sew on my binding. So let me set this up here, and I'm going to turn you around so you can see. Hi Joanne and Lessa. So you can see what's going on my sewing machine. And I'm trying to get in as close as I can, and I'm hoping I can, yes, thank you, zoom in so you can see. All right. Okay. So I have already prepared some of my binding, as you can see. I've sewn it on 3/4 ways around, so I can show you how to join it as well. But what I also would like to do, and I'm just going to get behind the camera so you can see, I've done some of the corners, and I'm going to show you how to do it on the sewing machine. But what I would also like to mention is that I actually fold my binding in half just to check the size and make sure that none of the binding corners stick out over the others, because then that means that there's something wrong and I have to retrim. So let me get started. I know my camera is trained towards the sewing machine, and would you know, my thread just came out. Isn't that the way? Okay. Back in business. Okay, so let me get to the corner that I'm working on, and I'll show you how I do my corners. Okay, so get started, and I'm stitching the binding on, and the raw edge of the binding is even with the outside raw edge of the quilt. And I'm trying not to go too fast, which is kind of hard for me, because I don't want my camera to focus and refocus, and I'm working on all that, but you know, the technical issues sometimes are hard to fix. So, as I'm getting closer to the corner, I'm getting a little slower. There is a spot that I have to note, and the spot is right here at the edge of the quilt. And I'm just putting a little chalk mark there so you can see where that is. And just about 1/4 inch before I get to that mark, that's where I'm going to stop sewing. And then I'm going to turn my quilt and stitch out to the diagonal corner. Okay? So I'm getting close. Now I'm lucky because my foot has these little notches. So there's a notch where the needle hits, and there's another notch where it shows me where it's 1/4 inch from that notch the needle is. So lift my presser foot, and I'm going to stitch right out to the corner here, and everything is going to come out, and so you can see what that looks like. And just forgive me, I'm going to look in the camera here real quick. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everything's in the picture. Okay, so now I have this binding, and how I'm going to turn the corner, the way I do it is I fold the binding this way, right along the edge here where I was sewing, and then I fold it back on the other side, and it makes kind of this triangle. Now the important thing is, if you make this triangle too loose, you'll have a sloppy corner, and it'll show because your corner, I don't know if you've ever seen that, it gets kind of knobby and there's just too much fabric in it. But if you pinch this corner and make it too small, you're going to have little curly-Q, little piggy ears on your quilt, and because you don't have enough room for that corner. So you have to be careful when you fold it that the edge of the fold is right against the edge of your quilt. Okay? So the edge of that corner fold is going to be right against the edge of your quilt. And so these are my threads, and I'm sewing with blue on purple so you can see it a little bit better. I don't know. But turning around, and I've just swept those threads out of the way. Okay? So I'm sewing on, and I don't know if you can see it. That's one of my new quilts. It's going to be the pumpkin stack, so I'll show you later after we get this done here. But okay. So I'm stitching around, and so I'm kind of looking how far do I stitch. I'm going to show you. Okay, so how far do I stitch? I kind of stretch my fingers out. I'm not going to get a ruler for something like this. It's about like that. So from where I started before to now. So I'm going to actually cut my thread for this so I can show you. And turn my quilt, and I'm going to move it so you can see it, I hope. Let me take a little peek here. Yep. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to cut it just loosely right here, just so I don't have to work with so many different ends. Okay? And then a little bit more, because I want it to be flat inside here. Okay? So now I'm going to open this, and I'm going to pull this inside and make a mark here. This is where the quilt joins, the raw edges of the quilt join without any kind of seam allowance. Now, I'm going to extend that line, and you can use one of those little squares for that. You know, any kind of ruler that has a 45 angle works especially well, but any ruler will work. And then I extend it to the other side. So let me explain what I'm doing. I'm not actually doing any kind of math. This is kind of quilting by, it's a visual way for me to put this binding together, and it works every time. So think about how when you put two blocks together, you have 1/4 inch from one side, 1/4 inch from the other side, and when you put that together, that is how your seam is created and fits into the color, into the cut pieces that you have. So I cannot add a 1/4 inch to this side. So that means I have to add a 1/2 inch to the other side. So what I do is I add a 1/2 inch, and you can use a ruler if you like. A lot of times I just eyeball it, but after all, this is a demo, so I have to be more careful. Okay, so the important thing is that you add your 1/2 inch, that you make your line so this gets bigger rather than smaller. And then I just take my scissors, cut along here, just like that, okay? And then I have those little pieces, and I'm going to sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam. So I've got those in my hand, and I'm not letting them go. You can use a pin if you want, but let's see. I'll pin this real quick. So another little trick I use, you have all this extra fabric here. Actually, what I do is I pin it off. I just pin it out of the way because it tends to kind of make everything shift. So here is the piece that I cut against the other piece, right sides together. And if you don't know where your right sides are because you've used something like a batik, you can see where the folds are. The top of the fold, so the top of the fold, the mountain part, goes together. All right, so let's stitch that. Starting slow here because I cut my thread. Okay, pull the pins out as I'm sewing. Okay, on to the other side. And all right, and I'm pulling this pin out, and I'm straightening that out so you can see. And look, it fits perfectly. So you open it, and I just finger press it. You know, I'm big on that. And you see where that was? You can see by the dog ears where we put it together. Now, really nice, if you have bias binding and you make it a little tight, you can stretch it into place. But if you don't have bias binding and you make it too loose, that's not a good thing. So I prefer bias binding, and I work a little tight. And so, stitch it together. And that was it. Now, wasn't that easy? And here's your joint binding right here. Very easy. So let me show you. Okay. Here, all your corners are done. Wow, I'm so close to it. I think I have to zoom back. See if I can zoom back here. Whoa. Okay. It won't zoom. Here we go. Okay, so I have another way of making binding that I wanted to show you. And that's something you can do with bias binding as well. So what I like to do is to do my bias, to take advantage of the bias and make a curvy binding. So let me turn that around and show you how I do the curvy binding. Okay, so here's one of the corners. And so you have different things. You could use a smaller kind of a round shape, or you could use a larger one. On this one, I'm going to do a larger one. And again, I'm just going to use my little chalk, and I kind of trim around it. Now, I don't actually cut this until I sew my binding on, because if there's a mistake, it's easier to take it out and you don't have frayed edges or anything else. So this is going to be, these are going to be the corners that I'm going to do from my binding that I'm going to sew on. Okay, so let me show you how to do that. Back to over here. I hope it's not too much back and forth. And here we go. I dropped my binding to the floor. So here we go. When you sew the corners of something, you can stitch it on and use a whole lot of pins, or this is what I do. This is not so good because now I don't have a start, but I just made myself a start. I always want to start with a 45-degree angle. And let me start from the tall side here. Another thing I like to do, I preview my binding. Do you see how this is a previous seam right here? I don't want it to fall on my corner, so I'm going to scooch it out of the way. Sometimes I lay the binding all the way around so I can see if there's going to be a problem. Okay, there we go. So now stitch along here, and then as I'm going, I'm kind of forming this into this round shape. And yes, I'm holding it, and you could pin this, but I just kind of give it a go first, and if then something's wrong, I can open it and pin it. So let me, if I need to, I try not to. I have this thing where I keep sticking myself. So you see, it's a nice rounded shape. I didn't have any trouble, and then I just move on to the next curve, and I just kind of stretch around it. It gets a little wrinkled on that side, but guess what? That's okay, because when you put it to the other side, and I'm just going to trim at this point, and you go to the other side, it's all good because it forms perfectly around the curve. Hopefully that'll come out on camera. And I always cut my binding so when I stitch them, I just cover that stitching line. And when I hand stitch them, I just cover that stitching line. I don't like loose bindings and bindings that are not filled, and I don't like to pull my binding way beyond the stitching line. So this is my rounded corner, and it's very easy to do with the bias binding. So let me turn you back around here, because I have some more stuff I'd like to show you. And just FYI, all the comments just disappeared, so I don't know. I pushed a button, something happened. I can't respond, but I just wanted to show you real quick a about the mystery quilt along. I know some of you have signed up for the mystery quilt along, and I wanted to show you some of the fabric choices that I'm doing. So let me just see if I can turn this around and put this in here. I have this little mount thing. Okay. All right. So here are some of the fabrics. No, it won't let me do it. Here are some of the fabrics that I'm using for this mystery quilt along. These are some of the background fabrics. So you have different choices. You have to choose one. And there's my light greens and there is my dark green. You can pick one of each, or you can have multiples. That's okay. This is what I've chosen for my dark accent. An accent is something that you don't use a lot. So I go bold on accents, because when I call it an accent, that means you use it sparingly and you can go brighter than normal. So I like this one better than I do this one. And then over here are some of my pairs that I've done. So they work in pairs. So this is my light and bright. For, you know, this is a choice that you have an orange, but then you look over here, maybe it doesn't look so good over here. Maybe this looks great. So you have to do little auditions. Here's another background fabric, a dark one. So this would look great on the dark fabric. The lighter, really light and bright, lighter ones are great on the darker fabrics. And so is this. I've also pre-recorded a video on that, which I'm going to post to YouTube and Facebook, hopefully. So here, this one works for both. See, this works really great for the dark, but it also works for the lighter ones. So this is just a little preview, and I'm posting a video on that this afternoon on how to choose some of your fabrics. It doesn't mean that you have to have all these greens. Just pick one of those greens and one of the darker greens and pick a pair of two. That would make it easier. But if you want to do scrappy, that's fine too. Just go by your values, and whatever looks the same in value can work as the same fabric. So let me get my phone back out of this thing here and turn myself back around. So thank you very much for watching. That was it for episode 4 of Quilt Snacks. I'm going to also post this later on YouTube, and I'm going to hopefully not have that issue again, since I'm landscape in this device now. Let me know how you liked it. Let me know in the comments if you have questions. Let me know if you're doing the quilt along, if there's something that I need to address. Something I wanted to tell you, on Friday, I'm going to do the first clue of Quilt Along. So if you've signed up, you're going to get it straight to your inbox, email, I wanted to say. If you haven't signed up, it's also going to be on the blog. But if you signed up, it's going to go straight to your inbox, which I think is going to be so much easier for all of you. And so 2 o'clock, Friday, first clue, the May Mystery Quilt Along. I hope to see you all there. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.